Hello, everyone. So, my name is Call, and what I'd like to talk about today is a question that I received over email. Actually, it was a really good question. I meant to answer it a couple of weeks ago, but you know how it is. So, this question, it's interesting. I never actually thought about it. But the question was essentially for those men who are practicing semen retention or abstaining from ejaculation, the the question came up as to when to release. I mean, myself, I've always kind of looked at it from the perspective of, well, I release when it simply just happens. In other words, it's generally not intentional. My intention is to never release. So if I'm making love and then all of a sudden, it spills over, oops, oh well. I have little tricks, which I've done videos on those tricks before of how to reverse the loss of energy. So that's generally what I do. So if I have an oops moment while I'm making love, I apply the trick and it helps kind of redirect the flow of energy. So all that being said, what's going back to the question, and there's probably there's several reasons to release. So first off, one of the guidelines I would utilize is 40 days. So 40 days is the ideal period of time I would say that a man needs to go, particularly if you're just starting out and abstaining from ejaculation. You need to go 40 days in order for your nervous system to take on a new pattern. When I was getting my master's in exercise physiology back in college, one of the things that I wrote a paper on was this idea of nervous system adaptation and the amount of time it takes for, once you start a weight training program, let's say, the amount of time it takes for the nervous system to adjust, because people will notice like tremendous strength gains in, the first 40 days, but they won't get any sort of change in terms of muscle cross-sectional area. In other words, they don't get the hypertrophy or the growth in the muscle mass, but instead what they get strength, but that's nervous system strength. So that's what we really want to cultivate. And again, you want to do this chronically. So if you make the first 40 days, bravo. If you decide you want to ejaculate or for whatever your reasons, then that's perfectly fine. You've started the process. However, you want to do this chronically. Like for instance, I started 15 years ago abstaining from ejaculation. I made it for the first 40 days, and then I made it 80 days, and then I finally released, and then I did it again, and I made it a whole year. Anyway, it's been various periods of time. Sometimes I can last 2 weeks, sometimes I last a week, sometimes I last 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 days. It's variable. But the point is chronically over time, you want to always make sure that you're doing what? Making a choice. Everything is about choice. And if you are on a habitual pattern of releasing all the time, you're masturbating or you're having sex, and the only way to punctuate the session or the experience is for ejaculation, you need to look at that. You're operating unconsciously. So that is one of the parameters I would use for ejaculation. Another parameter would have to do with when you feel that there's sufficient pressure to increase the magnitude of orgasm. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's how do I describe this? So sexual energy, as I've said in other videos, is about pressure. So, well, rather the orgasm and the magnitude of orgasm is about pressure. Sexual energy is the pressure. So if sexual energy has built up sufficiently and you're in the middle of either self-pleasure or having sex, and you feel that there's ample buildup and the connection between you and your partner is really good, because that's additional pressure. That's one thing we all need to kind of like remember, is that from a tantric perspective, from a Taoist perspective, the interconnection of energy that happens when people are making love or having sex, that adds additional amplification to the orgasm and to the sort of body's energy in general. So, so that's the whole thing, is you need to keep in the back of my mind, okay, I feel like I have sufficient pressure built up. It will increase the magnitude of orgasm. If the magnitude of orgasm is greatest, then what it does is it can lead to greater emotional catharsis. I've had visions. You have an orgasm and it's like, woo, I start seeing stuff. I mean, there's one particular experience I had, it was maybe about 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't remember exactly. Um, Huge amount of buildup. Me and my partner at the time, it was about maybe about 4 or 5 hours of stuff that we were doing, but the energy was building and building and building and building and building, and finally I ejaculated, and I kid you not, a lot of times when you look at the cover of these like sacred sexual books or tantra books, you'll see like, some goddess and a god intertwined in lovemaking in the sky and spirals around them and like supernovas and stars and comets and whatever. So all this like very woo woo imagery. Well, I saw that. So magnitude of orgasm is a thing. So that's another parameter you can use in terms of determining when to ejaculate. Another reason to ejaculate, not reason, but another way to take best advantage of the ejaculation, two things. One, if you're wanting emotional release, do it on a new moon. The body is more apt to release tensions around a new moon. New moon's a cleansing period. So if you're wanting to release emotions, wanting to release tensions, wanting to release, whatever, and essentially clean the pipes, do it around new moon. Do it around full moon. That's another time you can ejaculate. However, I find oftentimes that all the energy on a full moon, if you can picture this, so new moon, the energy is down near the root. As the moon becomes more full, the energy is pulled or squeezed upward towards the head center. So if you ejaculate closer to a full moon, you're more likely to get more intense heady experiences. There's pitfalls here, particularly if you're doing techniques to redirect the energy inward and upward. One of the pitfalls that I've experienced in the past is migraine headache. I've given myself headaches, and then I'm not doing this I'm doing this essentially as a word of caution for those of you who are very disciplined about this sort of thing and understand the techniques, is that you could cause yourself some headaches or some discomfort. But you also, if you ejaculate around a new moon, and let's say you don't have a lot of restriction around there, then what it does is it could light up your third eye. The energy is much more intense in that sort of upward motion. So it may activate higher centers a little more clearly. So something to consider. Let's see what else. Seasonal cycles. Okay, so seasonal cycles is another reason. Well, let's put it this way. I try not to ejaculate in the winter at all. Not successful necessarily, but I do my best. The winter, we are generally low energy, so meaning that the overall energetic well is shallow. So if the overall energetic well is shallow, then what ends up happening is that any depletion is going to be felt in a much more extreme way. So I generally like to abstain from ejaculation throughout the fall and the winter time, because that's when my energy is lowest, so hence I don't recover as quickly. Springtime, I can get away with ejaculating much more because the energy is building. In summertime, generally, once again, I can ejaculate more frequently because the energy is quite high at that point. So something else to consider. Sleep. So, I don't necessarily recommend this, but people do it. I did it for, a decade probably in my 20s. I couldn't sleep. I was insomniac, so I'd rub one out and go to sleep. So that's another reason some people would choose to ejaculate. Again, like I would use that as absolute last resort. I do not think, do breath work, right? Do breath work that emphasizes the exhale. So let's say inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale, nice O mouth, cooling breath, 8 count, exhale. So inhale nose, 4 count, exhale mouth, 8 count. Do that for 5 minutes, then try to go to sleep. It's a better choice than ejaculating just to go to sleep. But again, it's a reason some men might choose to ejaculate. Again, if you fall into the category of insomniac, it's kind of a, anyway, it can be a choice. So Let's see. I wrote down cray cray, and I had to think for a moment what the heck I was talking about. I meant crazy. Like if you're feeling crazy, that's another reason to ejaculate. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say you're. I'll give you a good example. I was in a long distance relationship maybe about 6 years ago. Most of the relationship took place in essence over the phone. So a lot of dirty talk and sending naughty pictures and texting. It was fun, but but so much of the relationship was in my head. So much of the sexuality was in my head. So in other words, I was overheated. So in Taoist philosophy, it's the idea is water up, fire down. The idea is you want a cool head and you want nice robust energy in the lower chakras, so or the lower energy centers. So the what ended up happening is that there were periods of time when I felt absolutely nuts, crazy, obsessing about sex. So there were periods of time where I was like, all right, I want a week. I'm in an obsessive place. I need, and so I'd rub one out. And so anyway, sometimes it's needed because you simply feel crazy. And on that thread, oftentimes the universe will provide you that release if you're going through crazy period. And for me, it was through wet dreams. When I was abstaining a lot, I would have nocturnal emissions uh, or wet dreams, and sometimes there's a lot of speculation as to why wet dreams occur. For me, I just simply looked at it as well, the universe or the energies or God or spirit or my subconscious, we can blame whatever, was essentially telling me you need to like release this energy. It's overwhelming. It's too much. Um, so yeah, there were often times the wet dreams were actually kind of fantastic in some ways. Uh, so yeah, keep that in mind. Sometimes the universe will simply take care of you. Let's see, procreation. That's another reason. That's the obvious reason that you might want to ejaculate if you want to have kids. I'll leave it at that. Let's see. Then, final thing. This might be a little controversial. So, your partner, girlfriend, wife, whoever, the sometimes we want distance. We want separation. So, the biological imperative to reproduce creates desire. Horny is the biological imperative to reproduce. It's the pushiness to say, hey, I need to procreate or make children. So what ends up happening is that this horny rises, it generates desire for the person who we're with at that moment. And essentially what we do is that we want to dive into that person. We want to make love to them, and it's very sticky and it's rich, and I love it. Now, when you ejaculate, a lot of men know this, and you have to acknowledge this. This is, in terms of sexual energy stuff, this is probably the most profound, important thing you can realize. Pre-cum, post-cum, you're a different person, all right? So what ends up happening to this drive to reproduce when you come? Well, it's over, right? The desire diminishes, horny goes down, and something else happens also, which is that there may be an initial spike in the sort of bonding chemistry, oxytocin, prolactin, these biochemicals. However, there is a diminishment over a short period of time. And what this does is it creates a separation. And why? Well, the biology, and again, I'm not saying we should limit ourselves to how our biology functions. I've been in discussions with people before. He says, we're animals and we men should not be monogamous. They should inseminate multiple women. It's a choice. Choice is what separates us from animals. I'm not saying we're higher than animals. We just happen to have an additional tool or faculty which allows us to discern, right? And to sort of like choose, I want to do this, or I want to do that. So that being said, if you're in a position where you just feel overly obsessive about somebody, you're overly stuck to them, ejaculate, right? And in the previous example I gave you about my long distance situation, the longing became so intense at times that I would need to release just so I could have some space. Because I felt like she, even though she was, 400 miles away, I felt like she was in my space. So I would need the release to separate, to create a separation, to essentially sever the bond for some shorter period. Usually it was about 2 days I would notice the separation, because I needed it in order to kind of like, find my core, my center, and some stability. So that would be another reason that you might want to release, is if you just need some space. So with all that said, hopefully you enjoyed this video and got something out of it. If you are a man and you are in need of, let's say, sexual energy coaching, I call it sexual sovereignty. Oftentimes we go through life kind of enslaved by our desires and our impulses. So, if you're struggling with porn addiction, sex addiction, and again, you just don't feel like you're in control of your sexual energy in general, I do coaching. So you can check out my website, which I have posted down below. There's a little bit of information there, but also my email is contained in my website. Email me if you got any specific questions or you are searching for greater understanding. So with all that said, thank you much.